I traveled alone for about 10,000 miles around the United States, inspired originally by the fact that I was living in Columbus, Ohio, which is the kind of place that makes you think about long-distance travel. And I was working very hard to support a lifestyle I didn't much like in a city I didn't much like, and was freelancing, writing, and doing consulting, and a little bit of trade journal work, and technical articles, and covering conferences, and that whole thing, a little online searching. And I found myself working at every available moment, every available ounce of energy to pay for a lifestyle in Midwest suburbia. And it suddenly dawned on me that since I didn't like what I was working so hard to pay for, that I really ought to come up with something else. So I made a list of all my passions, and they were things like travel and adventure, and romance, and bizarre encounters, computer networking, ham radio, tinkering, gizmology, bicycles, neat stuff in general. So obvious choice, I sold my house and moved to a bicycle and put a computer on it, powered it by the sun, lived in the computer networks, and became a nomadic freelance writer. This is the trip so far, starting in Columbus, Ohio, and most of the East Coast and all across the South and through Texas, and meandered around Colorado for a while looking for low passes. And I had to do 7 of them before I found one. I have a profound new respect for gravity with a 275-pound bicycle. And then, of course, the whole West Coast. So, I guess basically I should tell you what this is all for. I want it all, but I don't have any money to pay for it. Therefore, I have to work while I travel. And during the first trip, I carried a laptop computer, an HP Portable Plus, originally a little Model 100, then a Portable Plus, and had a small solar panel that charges batteries, and lived in the computer networks. Problem was, I couldn't use it while I was pedaling. And one day in West Texas, I was pedaling along hour after hour. Not much was changing. Occasional variations in the sagebrush density and things like that. But I started noticing that as every day, stories and wonderful bits of text were writing themselves in my head and just sort of floating off like vapors and such into the air. And I'd promised myself that I'd sit down at the end of the day and write, but I never would. And since my normal work mode as a freelancer is the same on a bicycle as it was in suburbia, which is PFD, procrastination followed by despair, I realized that the reason I wasn't getting anything done and making any money was that I couldn't work while pedaling. So I started thinking about a handlebar keyboard and visualized this little LCD that would come up out of the console, out of the front of the bike, and so on. Well, one thing led to another, and it turned into this. Now, there's 4 buttons on each side of the handlebar, so I type in binary now. It feels very much like playing the flute, which actually is part of the inspiration for it. And on that, without any software help, I can do about 35 words a minute, just raw text. And I'm just now adding some software that has about up to about 8,000 RAM-resident macros. So every group of keystrokes, when delimited by space or something, then is replaced by, whatever the phrase that's attached to is. And in this machine here, there are 5 micros. Well, no, 4 in here, plus a laptop. There's an old Model 100 with a 1/4 meg of RAM disk, and a 68HC11 that runs the bike and does all the real-time stuff, and a couple of Z80s, one for packet datacom and one for text-to-speech. So that's the version that's been on the road now for about 3 years, and it's the version that's now being retired. I don't know if you can't see the front panel very well from over there, but there's lots of switches, and it's architecturally inflexible. Every time I want to change something, it takes a soldering iron instead of a text editor. There's a security system that beeps me with a pocket beeper if anyone touches it. It can also say things with its synthesizer, and you heard it talk a minute ago when I did the boot. And also it has a little siren, which, I have that on the handlebar switch also because it sweeps into the ultrasonic and dogs really hate it. That's the level 1 response. The level 2 response is the kickstand dog whacker, which and speaking of noise, every bicycle needs a horn, so there's one of those. That's what the air bottle on the other side is for, which I guess you can't see there. But let's see, what else? There's 2-meter ham radio on there as well as a packet TNC, so I can do ham radio networking. And I've got a gateway running in Richmond, Virginia that links that into the network, so I can take anything from packet and tie it into UUCP or Genie or whatever, again, while mobile. Again, it's ham radio, so it's limited to business traffic, or non-business traffic. And finally, the whole mess is powered by solar panels. There's a 10-watt panel here and another one up front, and that charges batteries which run everything except the wheels. And as a conversation in the hall a moment ago yielded, the wheels are actually solar-powered too, because I'm part of the food chain. But you come up with a lot of snappy answers when you live on something like this. You get a lot of questions. Like one of my favorites is, "Oh, is that front wheel small, so you're always going downhill?" So anyway, that's kind of a quick overview of the current system. Oh yeah, it's 54-speed derailleur manual transmission there from 16 to 144 inches on a 275-pound bicycle with a quarter horsepower engine. That turns out to be pretty useful, especially the low end. The power to weight ratio is about the same as a 3-horsepower lawnmower engine pushing a 3-ton mini motorhome, just to kind of put it in perspective. The new machine is designed for a lot more flexibility and autonomy, and also it doesn't have so much hardware. So when I want to change something, I don't have to rewire toggle switches and ugly things like that. It's just all software. Here's a mock-up of the new front panel, which should be going into aluminum this week. One great big 640 by 480 display, backlit VGA resolution, about 16 levels of gray with a touchscreen on it, SAW. And then a 640 by 200 display down here, which is owned by a 68000 running fourth. And that's called the bicycle control processor, which essentially runs everything. And it's got a SCSI bus that goes out to a little I/O processor that creates lots of bits. And a lot of those end up controlling a big matrix of FETs, so that all possible audio sinks and sources, all serial lines, all analog lines, all of that stuff just comes into a big switching matrix. And there's these mitel parts that do it. They're wonderful. And so it's like this big crossbar. And that turns out to be really handy because there's so many things that, well, just take audio, for example. There's stuff that I don't necessarily think of at design time that ends up being real interesting later, like being able to pedal down the street, talking to a Japanese ham on 10 meters and running a phone patch for him through cellular phone. It's completely trivial. It's one line of code once the matrix is in place. Same with touch tone and all that stuff. It all gets switched through the network. So anyway, you can back off one level and see it all as a sort of resource bus that under control of the 68000 takes care of power and audio switching and all that stuff. There are 2 DOS engines in here. There's a 286 for running both mechanical and schematic capture CAD packages, CAD key and ORCAD, and also the satellite tracker software and computer-generated mapping from a CD-ROM database, which looks like it's coming from GeoVision. And the nice thing about that is with the GPS receiver, the bike can always know where it is and then use the mapping package in surveyor mode to put a map on the screen with a little blinking arrow saying you are here. And most of those packages now have algorithms attached that let you take individual addresses and locate them on the screen meaningfully. You know, they got street number coding and all that stuff. So I should be able to find anybody's location on there and touch it and get a little window that says this is who this is and so on. Also, yet to be determined is whether or not I can get a database of topo data. It does exist somewhere, but if it's in the right sort of form, then the machine will be able to take that topo data and, with an RTX 2000, make a wireframe model that I can view from any angle and see what kind of terrain is ahead. So those are all very practical things on a bicycle. Once all that stuff's in place, then it makes all the other control fairly easy. The transmission, for example, in the new machine is a little dedicated micro that monitors speed, torque, cadence, and heart rate, plus a keyed-in WIMP factor that I can put in from the handlebar keyboard that says, I'm feeling terrible today, don't work me so hard. And then by monitoring all those things and replacing the manual transmissions with Browning automatics, which can be controlled by basically this little gear motor, and you can tell it up, down. So I've got 6 bits, and 6 bits out of the processor can access any of 36 speeds by monitoring the actual conditions of the bike and of the engine. Let's see, communications. There's lots of new comm gear in the new system. This whole area back here is being replaced by another console, although it's not designed to be operated while riding except via remote control through another microcontroller. A little dedicated 10-meter ham radio, which works great with this antenna. I've talked to Japan and everything just with that on the bike. They find that amusing. You on bicycle? And let's see, and a standard HF ham radio gear, plus the cellular phone and an Oscar 13 satellite station. And that has a 450 uplink and a 144 megahertz downlink. The only catch there is I have to stop and deploy folding antennas in order to work the satellite. And the computer tells me where to aim it. There's a package that already exists called QuickTrack that runs on a DOS environment. And once the machine knows where it is through GPS, it calculates all the Keplerian elements and says, okay, the satellite's here, therefore your azimuth and elevation is this, here's the Doppler shift, and it's all very trivial. You just crank the radios to the right spot and aim the antenna, and got about one hemisphere of coverage at any given time. So I'm probably overlooking a few things, but that's the basic overview of the new bicycle. bicycles just ain't what they used to be, I guess. On the new brain interface unit, there's adding a few things to this. Still the audio, of course, stereo headphone jacks built in, better microphone I'm changing to. This lets me feel lightheaded just by throwing a switch, which is nice. I'm moving the lights up here. I'm moving 2 lights up here, and then in the front, this is another one of those little standalone projects. I'd love to have help on this one because I probably won't get to it this year. But I want to mount a little horizontal LCD with either just a diffusion screen for daylight backlight or a stray light from the helmet lights, and then an optical path that looks like about a 4-foot long. It'll look like a helmet-mounted display is what I'm getting to. So that when you look, I don't want to look through something because the power it takes to deal with a partially reflective surface is pretty substantial. But if I look up into the sky, into what's really a mirror, and then another mirror, and then up to the display, I should be able to pipe any of this map data or text in progress or whatever up into the helmet and eliminate the need to have a friendly environment going on so I can see the screen. Having speech output on the system is real handy. Speech input, well, I'll get to that. On the new system, I'm using a new speech synthesizer called the Audapter from Personal Data Systems down in Campbell. And it's made for the blind, and it has all kinds of different voices. And so all the different processors on the bike can each have their own characteristic voice when they want to send me a status message. So it'll be this little rumbling voice in the background that talks about my battery levels, and a little squeaky one that says, slow down the transmission, or whatever. And that's also real handy for dealing with people. Some of the things that this thing says under remote control or when triggered by the security system is do not touch or you'll be vaporized by a laser beam. And it's that sounds kind of frivolous, but it's actually very handy to have things that can communicate with people standing around it. Just to remind them that they're being watched in some form and they shouldn't sit on it or flip switches is real nice. And also there's a demo mode that the bike just gives a little rap about what it is because this thing draws crowds all the time, and I really don't like answering level 1 questions all the time. It's like a trade show, but worse. So, you curious about something? Restless? Hungry for knowledge or change? Got a dream? Go for it.
Are you going to ride me now, Steve?